Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying your week. Dragon Quest III HD2D Remake came out today. So I hope you guys are enjoying the game, and I just wanted to give some news based on an interview from earlier this week. If you enjoy Dragon Quest Top 10 jrpg content, please remember to like, subscribe, and turn notifications to all so you won't miss the next video. Now let's begin. Alright, so Sachi Kabari sat down with Dragon Quest III HD2D Remake producer Masaki Hayasaka to ask a few questions about the release, and there's some interesting information in regards to Yuji Horii's involvement with the project and how he, in my opinion, perfected the look of HD2D. Most of you remember the Octopath Traveler games and their look, which were pretty much the introduction we had as modern gamers to this HD2D look. These weren't remakes, of course, these were original games, and they kinda are what started this craze, what caused Final Fantasy to be remade as the Pixel remasters, and we got Live Alive in this HD2D format as well. And hopefully soon we get Chrono Trigger. I mean, come on, Square Enix, what are you waiting for? This look, when it first came out, I've always been critical of, and that's because it kind of had that weird, like, sepia tone. There was this weird, like, haze over everything. There was a blur that most developers use to create what's called, like, depth of field to make it look like it's extra, like, 3D. There's a lot more depth to the environments that you're walking through. But if you remember some kind of older videos of mine talking about Octopath Traveler 1 and 2, and even the early footage of Dragon Quest III HD2D Remake, you'll remember, it really had too much of that blur effect. Now, the producer of Dragon Quest III HD2D Remake was working alongside Yuji Horii, and one of the biggest changes, he said, that Yuji Horii made to the project was when he saw the early footage, Yuji Horii mentioned how it looked too blurry. There was too much of that blur effect, too much of that depth of field, if you were, so he told them to tone it down a bit, and that made a massive difference in the art style. So if you look at early footage of the game's trailers and stuff like that, you'll notice it does have kind of that foggy, blurry look to it that the Octopath Traveler games did. But then you look at the new footage of the game as it's going to be on release, and it just looks crisp. You've still got that perfect depth of field, but it's off in the distance how it should be. I feel like that's a major improvement on the HD2D look, and I feel like that is going to change a lot of Square Enix games to come. And I'm so grateful that Yuji Horii actually put his foot down and brought this up, because a lot of times when it comes to, like, Japanese business culture and stuff like that, it's really hard for people to say, hey, this doesn't look so great, can you make changes to it? Because it's usually like a long process. But Yuji Horii was like, hey man, this looks a little bit too blurry, can we dial that back quite a bit? And I think it would just make the game look a lot crisper, a lot cleaner, and it definitely does. Another thing they mentioned in this interview on PlayStation Blog was the fact that a lot of the HD2D games up until this point had sprite-based backgrounds as well as kind of 3D-based backgrounds, whereas Dragon Quest III HD2D Remake is solely 3D backgrounds with the 2D sprites kind of on top of it. And by that I mean, if you look at, like, buildings and towns and, like, even like the world map and buildings and stuff, towns on the world map, they were done as sprites in the Octopath games and in the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters. But if you notice in the HD2D remake of Dragon Quest III, they're all kind of designed in the 3D environment, and they just pop nicely. Another thing they were referring to in this interview was the difficulty, yet the precision that they wanted to go for when it came to the scale and the size and the design of all the locations in the game. They really made it a priority to make sure all the locations match up with your original NES or Famicom locations in the original Dragon Quest or Dragon Warrior 3. Now, so the scale is not one-to-one, because when you blow things up into a more realistic setting, sometimes it's a little bigger, sometimes things are a little bit smaller. A lot of the sprites on the NES version, like, they're a set size. Like, all the sprites are kind of like a set size. So when you can blow them up or shrink them down to the size that they should be in comparison to, like, the characters and the buildings and stuff like that, it definitely makes it a lot more challenging to get the scale of things figured out. But I think they did a phenomenal job of this, and I'm so glad that they did kind of spend that extra time to make sure all the locations suit the locations in the original game. There's so many like remakes and stuff like that where they take all these liberties and it's just not really a remake of the game. It ends up becoming an entirely new game altogether, which in some cases is fine, in some cases I'm not a big fan of it. Why call it a remake if it's not really a remake at all? This is like a perfectly designed remake for a modern audience of an NES classic JRPG, and I can't wait to dive into it further. And feel free to join me live here on YouTube as well as on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Dookie03, as I play through Dragon Quest III HD2D Remake. Come join me live, we can hang out, play through the game together, it'll be a blast, and I hope to see you there. If you enjoy Dragon Quest content, if you enjoy JRPG content, top 10 videos, reviews, podcasts, and more, please remember to like, subscribe, and turn notifications to all so you won't miss the next video, and I will see you guys in the next one.